Okay, we're back. We're going to do some coiling. We're going to use our Geek Vape coiling set. Okay, so what I've done here is I've cut 5 wires, approximately the same length. You want them all the same length when your coils are in sets. We're going to coil both decks. So I want 3 for my Titan, and I want 2 for my Aromomizer Plus. This is TheGig. I'm Johnny O. So there's got 2 and 2. I'm going to do 3 millimeter diameters. So I've chosen my 3 millimeter mandrel, and I'm just going to put it inside of our coiling tool like this. This set actually comes with 6 mandrels like this, different diameters, starting at 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters, 2.5 millimeters, 3 millimeters, like this one is 3 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters, and 4 millimeters. Here they are in the package I got them in. Right here, you can see them. Those are all the mandrels. This one's the 3 millimeter mandrel. Okay, the whole tool is called a jig. This particular post, 3 millimeter post, we call that a mandrel. You can use it as a adjustment tool and everything, but when you're coiling it, this jig is, the whole thing is called a jig, right? It's a coiling tool. The whole thing is called a jig. This particular piece is called the mandrel, because you're taking it and you're shaping the wire over top of it. Another thing is on the decks, there's little screws here. I mean, it's okay to call them grub screws, but they're actually set screws. That's what they call them. Mechanical engineers will call them set screws, not grub screws. I'm sure grub screws is just fine. That's because the reason they call them a grub screw is because they're inside and there's no head on them. So they call them grub screws. They're just set screws, and these are mandrels. That's the proper terminology we should be using. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, and I am going to coil one of these on camera so you can see the process using this. I think it's actually pretty good. This is a Geek Vape coiling tool. Pretty common. I think it's the most common. And it comes with these coilers. We got this particular coiler that goes on the mandrel. On one end it's got 3 millimeters, on the other end it's got 2.5 millimeters. So you can see the other end will not fit onto this mandrel. So I'll be coiling from this side, and I'm right-handed, so I'll be actually coiling like this. So I'll coil one on camera, and you can see the process. Then I'll do the other 4 off camera, and then we'll put them in our decks, and then we'll wick them. So the wire that I've chosen is also from Geek Vape. Geek Vape is a very good vapor supplier, although I'm not happy with their ohm meter they sold me. A lot of the other things I have from Geek Vape are amazing, like this coiler. Also their wire. The wire that I've chosen today that I want to use is called staggered fused Clapton wire. Okay, it's all stainless. There's other types of wire. There's Kanthal and this sort of thing. I prefer stainless. It is the cleanest. I do taste a difference between, say, Kanthal and stainless. I only use stainless. I have other wires that, when you hear of Clapton wire, it means it's some sort of twisted mesh wire. It's very good wire. That's why it's the most popular. It works the best in all vapes. It comes in different gauges and different shapes. This one is flat Clapton wire. This is fused Clapton wire. Today what I'll be using is staggered Clapton wire. Okay, it's a 22 gauge wire. According to my calculations, it's 22 gauge. So the gauge is, you'll go online and you'll try and calculate the ohms in the coil that you're going to make. You have to calculate the ohms through the size of the wire and the resistance in the wire. That's a little bit more difficult with these fused Clapton wires, or these flat Clapton wires, because I think within this actual wire there's at least 5 different wires that they've twisted and woven together. And so it's hard to calculate the gauge. So a lot of these will ask you the gauge of the wire. I found a calculator that you put these numbers in. So this stainless wire is 26 gauge plus 32 gauge times 2 plus 32 gauge. So it has 1, 2 times 2. It's got 5 different wires in it. And so I had to plug the sizes of those wires into the calculator, and it gave me 22 gauge. So that's how it works. I just wing it now. I have a pretty good idea that I want around 0.2 ohms or 0.15 ohms, or even if it goes to 0.25 ohms. I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm pretty sure that's what we're going to get with this wire. So here we are. I cut, as you saw before, I cut 5 of these the same length because I want the same coil every time. So we're going to put it in our Geek Vape coiling jig. I'm sure there's a proper name for this, but I got it in a package with a bunch of tools, not just the coiling jig. So I just call it a Geek Vape coiling jig. So we put our 3 mil on here. It is a little bit tricky, so you're going to have to get used to it. I pull the wire over the mandrel, just like that, and I start my first coil to see how it goes. What's going to happen is, you see it? It slipped off. That's fine. That's our first wrap. It's on 3 mil, and you can see that this 3 mil has a little screw there. Yeah, and that screw, I can put it closer to the hole, or I can put it near the outside. With the thicker wire, you put this screw, which is going to be turning the wire over the mandrel, closer to the outside. That's what I've done here. And I'm looking for 5 wraps. I'll actually get 6 because the first wrap counts as half a wrap, and there'll be 2 of those on the end. I'll explain in a minute. So we're going to do our second wrap. See how it came off? It's okay, you can pull it over. And we're just using the mandrel to tighten up those coils. On very few occasions when I do this, can I wrap all the coils without it slipping off. I've never been able to do that for whatever reason. So we're on 3 wraps so far. It does look tedious, and it is. Okay, we're going to go for our 4th wrap. I'm just going to pull it around. It isn't actually working very well. Pull it around. There's our 4th wrap. Okay, we're going to go for 5. There's our 5th wrap. Okay, lots of spare wire left over. That's 5 wraps. I'm going to, because the Titan deck is so big and it will take some bigger coils, I'm going to wrap this once more, so it'll be 6 wraps over 3 millimeters. And there we go. We got 6 really tight wraps over 3 millimeters. Now I'm going to show you how to finish this off. We take our pliers. And the leg, which will be the leg of the wire, you just tighten that off like this. Make it nice and tight. See, it's going to bow up. Push it back in. We're going to push it off the holder now, like this. And you see, you're going to get that kink. Put it back on the other way around. 2 things I'm going to do. First, I'm going to straighten it like I did the other leg, like this. Now I'm going to tighten that wrap with the coiler, and that should do it. So there we have it. That's our first rough coil. Okay, it's got some really tight wraps on there with our, what is it, stagger Clapton, they're calling it, stagger Clapton, and I've calculated it to be about 22 gauge. Okay, so I want the resistance around 0.25 ohms or 0.15 ohms. Right in there. I think this will be perfect for both of my decks. So off camera, I'm going to do 2 more of these, but before I do that, I want to try something just maybe you're having the same problem where this coiler won't stay on the jig because you actually have to kind of pull it back as you're coiling it, and you're pushing it forward and it's not staying on, so it bends the wire. So I'm going to try one more on camera to see if I've actually learned anything. So there's our first one. I'm going to try one more on camera. Remember, it's the same wire, it's the same length. I'm doing the exact same process again. So here we are. I leave about that much. I want nice long legs. And I'm going to take the first wrap. I do that with my fingers almost always, and I hold the wrap with my finger. Then I get it ready for the coiler, which is here. And we're going to try and do our first coil. So there's our first wrap. The same thing is happening again, no matter. Okay, so it didn't happen. That's 2. That's 3. That's 4. And now we have 5. I just figured out what I was doing wrong on the first one. I just figured it out. We actually did 6, if I remember. I know how to do this perfectly every time now. Okay? There's 6. See how much easier that was? I did learn the first time I did it. So there they are. We have 2 coils, exactly the same. Okay? You notice the second one was much easier. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the legs to the same length. I'll explain why. We have the 5 coils. We just coiled up on our Geek Vape Coil Master. Very good jig. It does take a little bit of practice to learn to actually allow, not even pull, but allow that coiler to come back. As you can see, once you have it down pat, it takes, seconds to do one of these and do a good job. These are actually pretty good coils. These are 6 wraps over 3 millimeters with stagger Clapton, and they look very good. The only thing is we have all these lengths, and you can see how long they are. I use too much wire because I don't want to be short on wire. And these wire spools for 10 feet cost about $5. I don't know how long it will take to use 10 feet, but I imagine it will be quite a while. It says right on it the amount of wire. I believe these are 10 feet. It's a lot of wire, so it's okay to go over. At least you have enough wire. Now the next thing we're going to do is we got to cut all these lengths, all these legs to the same length on all of them. So I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to take one, I put it on the mandrel, and I just cut the length, the legs, and then I'll show you what I do. Okay, so these are both the same length. They're obviously too long. They're obviously too long for either of those decks. But that's how I want it, because it's just the first cut, right? We're just making coils. The type of coil you would see if you bought a box of coils. That's kind of what you would get. I'm going to put this back on the mandrel, take another coil, and put it over top, and cut that length, because the legs are right next to each other, that exact length back onto this coil as well. And I'm going to flip it over, just like that, and cut the other leg to the exact same length. There it is, another coil exactly like I just did. I'm going to do the same thing with all of these coils. Cut the leg lengths exactly the same. Okay, done. So what we have here is we have 5 3 millimeter staggered Clapton, or sorry, 3 millimeter stagger Clapton coils. We don't know the ohms reading. I could calculate them online with those calculators. They're never accurate. I don't know why. I'm sure some guys are really, really good at it and they can do it perfectly every time. I can't. But these look like they can calculate their ohms on their coils perfectly every time. I can't for whatever reason. But but here's 5 stagger clapped in coils. They're all very nice. Kind of, they look how you would look if you bought them. I just made them from raw wire, raw materials in my jig. So the first deck we're going to do is we are going to coil up. We're going to coil up our Aromomizer Titan. Okay, here we go. We're going to take our coils we just made, and we're going to put them in our Aromomizer Titan deck. It's going to take 3 of them. It is a postless deck. The first thing you got to do is take the legs, and they all have to be the same size. So I'm going to put a couple legs in here, and I'm going to try and measure which size I need. So let's open up. Once I do one and I know what size the legs are going to be, I'm going to take the other coils and I'm going to cut them the same length before I install them. Length is important because we need uniformity, because all 3 of these coils have to fire simultaneously, so they have to be the same size. We know the diameter is the same size, we know it's the same wire, and we know that it has the same amount of wraps. But now I gotta determine the length of these legs by I'm gonna throw them in, and I'm just gonna look at them. And I'm going to cut them off where I think they should be. I want them sitting just above the deck, so there is some air going underneath them. So I'm looking at that. I'm going to guess, and I'm going to make a cut now. I cut both of those the same length. I've done this a few times. I think that looks about perfect. So if I put that in, it's sitting just off the deck. That looks about right. So now that I have these legs about where I want them, again, I'm going to take the first one I've cut, this one, I'm going to put it on the mandrel like this. I'm going to cut the other 2 coils, legs, the exact same length as this one now. I did this 3 days ago, and this is how I did it. And when the first time I fired up that deck, burning in the coils, they all fired simultaneously the first time. I took the time to make sure my legs were the right length across all 3 coils. Even if you don't make your own coils and you buy them, you still have to do this, because the legs will be like this. In store-bought coils, they'll be just as long as this. They give you more than you need, and you do have to trim them yourself. So even if you buy these coils, you'll have to trim the legs like I'm doing now before you install them. So it's a little awkward trying to keep everything in frame. Okay, so that's about right for all 3 of them. I'll show you in the camera. All 3 of them have about the same size legs. Now we can install them. I'm just holding them there with my fingers as I tighten the set screws down on the sides of them. They're going to move around when I tighten these set screws, and I'm not tightening them all the way. I'm just loosely tightening them because I want to maneuver it after. So yeah, I can feel that coil. I'm really trying to keep the height the same. So it's only just a little bit tight. It's not tight all the way. And I just want to straighten that coil. And I'm not tightening it yet. I'm not going to tighten it all the way yet until I get them all in and I have them positioned where I want them to be positioned. So now with this middle coil, the screws come in from the side, and I can feel with my fingers, because the first coil's on, where the height should be. I'm going to tighten the first set screw. If the height's not right, I can loosen it off and adjust the height. Like right there, that's too low. So I'm just enough to hold it and straighten it a little bit of straightening. Put the jig tool, the mandrel, the coiling tool back in, because it's the exact same diameter, and you don't want to mess up your coils at this point. Use the mandrel. It's the easiest way to not damage your coils. I'm going to look at it. They look about right. Still not tight. I'm going to put the third coil in on the same height. Again, with my fingers, I have those other two coils. I can feel when it's the right height. And obviously, when I tighten the set screws, I know it's going nice and tight onto the legs. Okay, so it's not very tight. None of them are. So I'm just going to space them evenly and position them and take a good look at it. That looks pretty even. And we know that those legs and those coils are the same height, so we have the same amount of material in each coil, and they look pretty even. They're evenly spaced. They're about the same height off the deck. I mean, it's not exact, but they are pretty close. They're nice and straight. So I'm going to do the final tightening on each of them, and then one last adjustment before it's ready to burn in. Nice and tight, not too tight. You don't want to strip the inside of that set screw. So not too tight. I mean, you want it tight, but don't over tighten. I worked with a guy once. He was a guy, we called him Heavy Hands, because he would walk around the shop and he would strip every screw. So not too tight. You want it tight, good and tight, but not too tight. Now, they've moved a little bit because of the final tightening. So I'm just going to readjust them with my mandrel in my coiling tool. I'm just going to look at them for symmetry. That's what I'm looking for. We got them a good height off the deck. That's what I like. I find if they're too close to the deck, because of the size of the tank, which is here, the really big tank, it will heat up that deck, and I really don't like that. It's such a big mod. So I'm just going to give them a final adjustment. When I fire them for the first time, I'm sure I'm going to have to adjust them again. When they're red hot, I'll adjust them again. Okay, so we're not going to burn this in right now. We're going to do our other deck. We'll do our other deck, and we'll do the same thing with the coils, and we'll burn them both in at the same time. Here it is. Coiled. We're going to wick it. First, we're going to do our other deck. The other deck is exactly like this. It's postless. We're going to put the exact same coils in it, but it has 2 coils instead of 3. There's our other tiny little deck. We're going to put it on our broken Smo-Ant Cylon. After 2 months, the screen is broken, so I'm just going to make sure my set screws are all the way out. Here's our coils. We just made two stagger Claptons with the same size lengths. Even the ones I put into the bigger deck had the same size legs as this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert one of them into the deck again so I can get an idea of where my length should be. I'm going to clip one to length and then clip the other one to the same length. The deck is much smaller. The holes aren't as deep as that bigger deck, so I'm going to be clipping off a lot more from these legs. You can see that. I mean, that's hitting the bottom of the deck. Yeah, it's hitting the bottom of the deck, see how high. So there's a lot to come off of there. I'm just going to clip this one where I think it should be. Or I think it should be there. Once I have one, I can do the other one. You know, I think 6 wraps might even be too much for this. Okay, so that's about the height I want. So I'm going to take this off, put it back on the coiling tool. I'm going to cut the second coil legs to the exact same length as this one. So we have 2 even coils. One. That's pretty good. So we got our leg length symmetrical. We're going to insert our first coil. Again, with these decks, there's a positive side and negative side. So one leg has to go in positive, the other one has to go in negative. You can't do this. You can't do that. Those would both be on the negative side. You have to come across like that. There's an insulator in between. So we're just going to do that now. Insert this guy. And we're going to tighten him. Loosely tighten. So we can position it properly. Okay. Just adjust it. It moved around quite a bit. Well, I don't like that one leg. But it should be fine. Okay. That's the first adjustment. Throw in the other leg, which is the same length here. We're going to loosely tighten. Loosely tighten, that's almost like an oxymoron. We're not going to over tighten, we're just going to cinch it. Just grab it. Enough that it won't move when we adjust it. Just like this. Put it through, pull it over. That looks pretty even. They're the same coil, same length legs, and they're about the same height off the deck. That's all we're looking for. I'm going to tighten them, really cinch them up now. Both of them get cinched up nice and tight. They're both very tight now. I'm going to adjust them one final time before they burn in. We want nice even space off the deck for both of them. And we want them nice and straight. Yeah, nice and straight. They're about the same height off the deck, both of them. They look pretty good. So we're ready to burn in both of these decks, Aromamizer decks. Okay, so we got our deck on our ohm meter. We're going to try and burn it in. It is burning in now. What we're looking for is the current to hit both of those coils simultaneously. Okay, we got a couple hot spots, but actually right off the start those are pretty good. There is a hot spot, so when I do adjust these with the current going through them, I use ceramic tweezers. I'm just going to strum them. Like that. I'm going to give them the current again. What we want is we want simultaneous firing. And it looks like that's what we have. There's one hot spot on this top coil here. I'm going to strum it a bit. I'm just cooling that down because before I let it cool down again, I just want to make sure one last time that this is hitting simultaneous. We have a nice symmetrical current going through that. Both of these coils, yeah, that's what we want. You can tell by looking at them, they're about the same temperature. There's no hot spots. It's because I took the time to make those coils the same and cut those two legs exactly the same. I took the time to do that. Usually when I do that, I don't get too many problems when I'm burning in the coils. Okay, I had to switch from the Geek Vape ohm meter. Not only does it register shorts that don't exist, but it also overheated, or it told me it was overheating because if I feel this block, it's not actually hot. The deck wasn't actually very hot, but I think what happened is it was drawing too much power from the battery too fast, and so that registers as an overheat. So what I've done is I've taken the deck and I've put it on our mod. I'm going to pulse it on the mod to burn in these coils. Just pulse it on the mod. I do have TC control, so I do have to pulse it. On all mods you have to pulse. Okay, so I can see some hot spots. I'm just going to put as much current through these as I can. I'm going to strum the coils. This one on the end isn't firing as good as the other ones. Remember, these are ceramic tweezers. You have to use ceramic. I'm just going to pulse it some more. I want these to go red so I can see the hot spots. It's a little bit more tedious to get 3 coils firing simultaneously than it is for 2 coils. Okay, I put them back on the ohm meter and stopped overheating, and you can see they're firing from the red. You can see they're firing simultaneously. There's no hot spots. They look pretty good. One side of this I would like to improve the current, but this looks actually pretty good. You hit the button, they're firing. This one at the top, it's firing a little bit slower, so I'm going to strum it a bit. You can strum them, you can move them around a little bit. Okay, so I got an overheat again. I'm Johnny O. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your questions and comments below.